So for the motivation, I can't help but think of the incredible kindness of the Buddha to give us this powerful tool of purification. I mean, in our world, we have lots of tools to help us through challenging times, to help ease our suffering. I mean, I'm astounded that the bright minds of our medical world put together a vaccine in less than a year for one of the biggest pandemics in the world's history, at least that we know of. That we have psychological tools, we have physiological tools, we have cultural and social tools, which have certainly proven their effectiveness in terms of helping us to ease, mitigate, and at times temporarily stop suffering dead in its tracks. But only temporary, and only the suffering of this life. So as astounding as it can be, there is a reality to the fact that it's temporary. And because we are under the control of afflictions and polluted karma, despite all the tools, we are still compelled, propelled into yet being born, getting old, sick, and die, and having minds that see reality totally in the opposite way in which it exists, and then grasping at that misconception, not just about the world, but about ourselves. So all of this together, and the karma that we create from this misunderstanding, propels us at the time of death. Off we go to yet another rebirth in samsara. So how I see the Buddha's kindness, that it extends beyond the happiness of this life. And what he really truly does is teaches us how to be physicians to our own minds and hearts. He gives us the diagnosis, he gives us the prescription, he gives us the most remarkable, profound medicine. That if we follow, take it, read the directions, we will be healed of all the causes for the unsatisfactory and the suffering and this endless cycling, including cutting the root of it all, this self-grasping, self-concern, ignorance. And that the ultimate healing from following this prescription, being physicians to ourselves, is the attainment of the mind of a Buddha and the radiant form body of a Buddha, in which we have all the tools, all the medicines to bring to sentient beings in order to be of the greatest benefit. And being the greatest benefit by helping them become physicians to themselves with the medicine of the Dharma and to attain Buddhahood, to be of the greatest benefit to themselves and to others. So this beautiful passing on of learning what is the suffering, what are the symptoms, what is the diagnosis, what's the medicine, and how to take it. The Buddha has given us everything. And so may we be able to see the teachings that we're receiving this week as from Venerable Tibi, who is one of the most incredibly skilled nurses in our world today, to help us to take the medicine. And it gets a little nasty tasting when it comes to purification. But the healing properties show themselves. And so may we be able to do that not only for our own ultimate healing in the form of awakening, but to be of the greatest benefit in order to free all beings as well. Let's really hold this in that view. Hold this time together in that view. May we become physicians to ourselves and to each other. I have always loved that analogy from the very get-go on how the Dharma is the medicine and how the Buddha is the doctor. So, well, I wanted to sort of begin this, well, first of all, is I wanted to sort of share some of the perspectives that Venerable gave on these particular texts. Last year, she unpacked them at the last Vajrasattva retreat. So I have taken some of the high points of her teachings from last year, and I put them together with some insights that I had when I did a retreat 2 years ago in California, a personal retreat. I used this particular, the Bodhisattva's Confession of Ethical Downfalls, as part of my Lam Rim. So every time I would do a session, I would use one of these particular paragraphs and unpack it as to see what is the destructive karma that has been created in relationship to these different objects. And I took it into my own life and what would have happened if I created it in the past, and how can I avoid creating them in the future. So I've put some of my own kind of sharings into the talk today too, so I hope that that will be helpful. And one of the things that I love about Venerable's style of teaching, especially yesterday morning, when I was sitting in my seat there, it felt like she had come to the table here and gone up to a wall, and it opened up this huge window and let all this fresh air of the Dharma in. This kind of her ability to offer us options, to offer a very, very vast, fresh, new perspective on how to look at the Dharma. And when we're talking about purification, this stuff gets pretty tender and pretty tough and kind of hard and stinky and stuff like that. So it's great to have a teacher who doesn't mind opening up the windows and giving us an opportunity to look at purification with a very, very big, open mind. Because I don't know about you, but I tend to have one or two options when I'm looking at purification or looking at my own mind. First of all is that whatever happens to me is either your fault or it's all my fault. I'm right and you're wrong, and I will always be this way. I can't change. I mean, that's kind of my options. And yesterday with Venerable's teaching and her motivation, which I love her motivations, is that she had so many options laid out that it just kind of gladdens the mind. You can feel like the hinges of the window just kind of creaking open as the fresh air blows through. And so I really very much appreciate her kind of sort of setting the stage, setting the tone before she gives teachings on how to really make ourselves receptive and open to what we're about to hear. So before she taught on these paragraphs in the Confession of Ethical Downfalls last year, she had a few ways that she shared with us on how to sort of look at the mind as we're going through this. And she's already kind of unpacked these today when she taught today. But I want to share a few of them because I have found them not only helpful in my continual purification practice, also on the retreat I did a few years ago, and I think they're really practical, they're heartfelt, and they really do apply. So one of the things that she had talked about is working out our aversion to looking at our harmful actions and being okay with feeling uncomfortable. The squirming, the restlessness, the not wanting to see. There are some ugly things we've done in our lives. And there's old constructs, there's misconceptions about ourselves that we've been carrying around for a really long time. And then it kind of goes hand in hand with this strange construct that if we suffer enough, we will somehow atone for what we've done and remedy the situation, which is really a stupid idea. Because what happens is we get into some real self-judgment, we get into self-criticism, we get into self-hatred, big time. All right, so one of the things that she taught last year that I have found, and we share as, I think, a common value that we try to cultivate in the community here, is to cultivate some self-acceptance. It's a huge factor when it comes to purifying. It ensures that as we go through the different levels, as our practice gets more sincere and gets more consistent, a lot of stuff starts to come up. And self-acceptance is a way that ensures that we keep our heart open when we purify, and that we can clearly see that self-hatred is an obstacle to purifying our minds. Instead of opening up our hearts, it really shuts it down. So it's so important to have this beautiful self-acceptance, which has got qualities of understanding, has qualities of wisdom and compassion in it, which this sense of self-recrimination or punishment just doesn't have any of those qualities. And it really doesn't change people anyway. I mean, this whole punitive kind of justice punishment paradigm that have found ourselves in the West doesn't really change people or move us at all towards virtue. We might do it for a while because we get scared, threatened of being punished, or fear of failure. I know that sometimes when I'm afraid of backlash or being punished, that I will go to all measures to try to change. But sooner or later, resentment replaces that fear, and then all hell breaks loose. So self-hatred is pretty much punishing ourselves. So what Venerable really encourages us, and she said it again today, is any time that we start getting this little niggling of self-criticism and self-judgment, and it starts coming into our radar screen, what she's been advising is to look at that self-hatred directly and ask, what is this about? There's this curiosity, because we want to challenge these false narratives, these, quote, conspiracy theories that she's really encouraging us more and more in her teachings to challenge them by saying, what is this about? What am I saying to myself that justifies this attitude? Where have I learned to punish myself? Where have I learned to accept punishment and demands as a way for me to change? Where did I learn that? Where did it come from? And to really, how we can sort of challenge and start to dismantle this stuff is to start to get some answers, which is what the group discussion today, Venerable Damcho's questions were great to try to figure out, tease apart, where do we get some of these negative beliefs that we believe so much? So she really encourages us to, by using reason and logic and questioning and self-assessment, is that we can start to dismantle these mental constructs, our own conspiracy theories, which I really love. I've noticed over the years that there gets to be these sort of choice words and phrases that our culture starts to use to describe things, usually afflictive states of mind. Venerable incorporates them into the teachings. A few years ago, there was this word toxic when you're talking about relationships. She started using that, this whole thing about going into a rabbit hole. We've been hearing this stuff in our culture. She'll take that and she'll use that as a way to describe the ignorance, the afflictions, the states of mind that we run into. So this whole idea that we have our own conspiracy theories, that she says we really need to challenge them, tease them apart, and how, because we know and we have seen what conspiracy theories do to people's minds, how they destroy the trust, they destroy kindness, they kindle all sorts of paranoia and hatred. And that's not far from when we start having our own conspiracy theories, that we start breaking our own trust, or our trust in relationship to others, our sense of betrayal, paranoia, suspicion, and the kindness goes out the window. So I really do think that this construct of conspiracy theories can be used to challenge some of these false narratives. And this whole idea that says that we have to be punished or suffer in some way in order to make things right. So the Dharma really helps with this self-acceptance. We can start using the self-acceptance, start seeing this is the reality of my life, this is what's going on for me, this is what my mind's doing right now, and that's where I am. Self-acceptance is so tuned into the reality of the situation in the moment, where judgment and punishment and conspiracy theories are all kind of conjectures about what happened in the past, might happen in the future. So self-acceptance is a beautiful quality to have, a self-acceptance of our behavior and others' behavior. It doesn't mean that it's okay. And that's, once again, another piece that Venerable talks about over and over again, is when we get into purifying and looking at our behavior and understanding other people's behavior, to realize that's very different than the sentient being who is actually enacting those behaviors. This is what I've got. This is my situation. This is where I am in my practice. It's not good or bad. It's just that's what's happening, and I can really purify. Accepting the reality of the present or the past really prevents us from getting stuck thinking that there's something solid, something unchangeable about our minds. and knowing that the future is open with this self-acceptance. So we talk about it a lot in community, and I'm getting a little bit more convinced that this is a good quality to have, particularly when we're trying to let go of a lot of old stuff. The other thing, too, that she has talked about, and I remember I almost have a visual image of it written on a transcription, that she said that so much of what we have to purify are things from the past. And she says what part of the self-acceptance is to see that who we were then and what our circumstances were. And there's two ways that we can go with this type of reflection. Is first of all, she says, don't compare ourselves to the past self. So right now we've met the Dharma, we've got some tools, we've got some wherewithal. We've got to be really careful that we then don't use that wisdom and look back on when we created all the negativities and start bringing some judgment and criticism onto who we were. So we take the wisdom of the Dharma and we use it to understand the circumstances. What tools did we have back then? To not bring up a harsh judgment of our past self or see our failings as stupid or useless. What was I thinking? I can't believe I did it. The wisdom of now was not at the wisdom back then, and it's best to just use it to cultivate some compassion and some understanding. To consider that our capacity back then, we probably hadn't met the Dharma yet, so we had some tools maybe. And if we look at the past through the lens of what we know now, we can be pretty harsh on ourselves. And since we are not that person now, we can use the wisdom now to say, I rejoice that now I have the Dharma as a guide, and I have compassion for the one back then who was so confused, so out of touch with himself, herself. So self-acceptance is a really wonderful way to sort of bring all of that on board as we're purifying, because it's going to come up from the past, is to bring it on board and say, I know where you were. You were really confused. You were really out there, totally harming yourself in a big way and harming others as a result. So that's another powerful thing about self-acceptance. And then when the old junk comes up, and it will, we keep challenging it and slowly dismantling it. So that's one of the things that she has really encouraged us to bring into our purification. The other one that she talked about yesterday, that I like the new word. It takes some doing, but I like this reforming the relationship. I really think that, I'm thinking about that. That most of our suffering, most of our destructive actions are in relationship to sentient beings, especially those that we're close to. And so this reform concept, reforming the relationship, is that, as she said, we can't go back to the way any relationship was, because we don't want to repair it. We don't want to bring it back to the way it was, because apparently the way it was is the way why we got into trouble in the first place. So to repair it means we want to get it back to sort of the same semblance of it used to be. When to reform it is to really look at the relationship. If both parties can grow and own their own stuff, and it can be restored, it's going to be different. And it's either going to be really, really precious, and it's going to go to a deeper level because you've got some space to really meet each other where you are, or you're going to find out that a lot of the relationship was on unrealistic expectations and false promises and all sorts of superficial stuff, and you're not as close as you thought. And then that's okay too. That reforming the relationship is actually, the trust isn't there that you thought, and it's okay. And so the relationship becomes a more authentic relationship, closer to the truth. So I really like this new word. But to see that when these relationships we care about and we've invested years in go so badly is to check out once again what part of it was ours and if we want to reform it, to have a sincere motivation on how that might look like from our side, and knowing that we'll do the best we can and we'll reform it in collaboration, in partnership with the other person as best as we can. And that usually includes stop blaming others, knowing that we have great impact on each other. And she goes into kind of unpacking this a little bit more on these really difficult relationships where we have a lot of hurt. Is that she says that we've done some negative actions in the past, and it's mine. And as they ripen, I become an open target for it to ripen and for someone with a negative state of mind to come at me. And this is a really powerful way to think, because you own your own responsibility that your karma is ripening in this very difficult exchange or this troubling situation, and that the person is struggling with their own afflictions. And here's your karma getting all the cooperative conditions, and the person's in relationship with you, and everything just sort of bubbles up, and that's kind of how it goes. And that it is, I'm experiencing the ripening of my karma. And that the person who is suffering, who is afflicted, and is continuing to be confused, be hurtful, is creating the causes for future suffering. So there's a ripening of our own karma that we can accept with some humility, with some compassion, and we can also have some compassion if the person that we have the relationship with continues to find it difficult, continues to challenge, continues to blame, continues to do whatever, is that we can offer some compassion to that as well, to that person as well. So there's this circle, ripening of karma, creating of karma, ripening of karma, creating of karma, and it's a lot going on at the same time. The other thing that I found that was useful in this reforming of our relationship that I thought about yesterday is that sometimes it is reforming the relationship to sentient beings that we have never met. This is a whole mental transformation. When for example, when I see people who are acting to invoke chaos, to endanger democracy and freedom, to foment racism and prejudice, my initial reaction is to be furious with them. I wish them harm. I wish them to be punished. I wish something to happen to them. I can't believe they're doing this. They're destroying things. And I get so bent out of shape that if I was in a relationship with them, they would be out the door. They would be down the road. But when I think about the karma that they are creating, Venerable says, it's like I don't want to go near that karma with the 10-foot pole, because it's creating causes for tremendous negative karma. So instead of hating them, this is what I've been doing for the past number of months, is to move into a kind of compassion. So this is part of my purification practice, is reforming my relationship to these sentient beings that I have perceived as a threat. Now, not to say that the behavior needs to be addressed, but for me to get over this demonizing of people that behave in ways that I find harmful. So I am reforming my relationship to sentient beings that I may never meet, but cause me a lot of suffering. I cause myself my own suffering because I look at them like this. And so I try to use purification to ease and to let go and to hold them in this understanding of compassion that they are creating some serious causes to have this come back and really chew them apart in the future. And to see them as teachers for our own practice. And that doesn't mean we go along with them, but it's an internal reforming of our relationship to sentient beings. Because once again, they've been our mothers in the past, they've been our parents in the past, they will be our parents in the future, and they are one of the substantial causes for our awakening. And right now they're giving us an opportunity to cultivate fortitude and compassion, understanding, the understanding of impermanence, karma ripening, and that no matter the actions, how horrendous they may be, and we wish those people not to suffer, we can actively engage as citizens to try to change what's happening, but with a mind that has some fortitude and some compassion. And so that has really, this reforming relationship is something I encourage to bring in. If you've got a mind like mine that's been just really off the charts with what you've been seeing in the streets, I would strongly encourage to use this reforming relationship as part of a purification. Let's see. The other one that she shared, I think she taught yesterday and reminded us again today, is to see that that no matter how horrendous the activities are that we see in others, that chances are since beginningless time we have done them ourselves. And she says that this can be a very humbling thought and that can counter any spiritual arrogance that we may have in relation to witnessing the serious misdeeds and outrageous behavior of others. We are not above this. Anything is possible when our afflictions arise. So she says this is a very powerful antidote for any type of arrogance, looking down on people who seem to not have it together, who can't control themselves, who can't look at things in a kind way. It's to say, well, we're under the control of our afflictions. Who knows? So to really bring it down to a more humbling, situation, and to imagine that if we were born given the same circumstances that many of them have, difficult life situations, the karma that they may have been brought into the world very heavily in their minds, would we be the same person we are right now, being able to work with ourselves, be able to work with our minds? Or do we adapt to the culture and the karma that we were given? Whether it's to be a domestic terrorist, threatening to kidnap and kill a politician. Given the circumstances, given the mind, given the karma, what would we do differently? So this just really brings the pride down a lot. I've been in samsara since beginningless time. I've done all sorts of things, and I don't know if they're still on my mind stream. So take the situations that we are seeing, put them onto the cushion when you're prostrating. May I never, and if I have done this, if I have threatened another person's life, if I have blown somebody up, if I've put a knee on somebody, may I purify it. And what this does, it really strengthens our mind, gives us some juice to develop the antidotes so we can endure hardship in the future. There's a real strong, we never know what's going to happen in the future. So part of purification is to strengthen and give a resiliency to our mind so that if, karma ripens and we're in a difficult mental situation or an external situation, we've got some wherewithal, we've got some strength to be able to deal with it. And then, of course, at the time of death, what we're doing right now, purification, is giving us some mind states that we may be able to call up at the time of death. Are we going to be able to concentrate and be at peace at death? Purification really gives us a powerful tool to increase the possibility that we may have a mind that's going to be at peace, have some clarity, and not be freaking out when we die. So those are kind of the things that Venerable and my own kind of thoughts when I did these particular texts in a purification practice a few years ago that I wanted to put together, because these ethical downfalls are pretty serious business. And so to have this kind of strong mind, to use the perspective of karma, of reforming relationship, of having self-acceptance, is a really good kind of mind to have as we start to unpack these texts. Okay, so it begins on page 62, or it's in the morning meditation practice. It's on that toggle there. So the first paragraph I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. It's the one that says, all you 35 Buddhas and all the others, those thus gone, foe destroyers, fully awakened ones, and transcendent destroyers, or existing, sustaining, and living throughout the 10 directions of sentient beings' worlds, all you Buddhas, please give me your attention. Well, we know what that really means. They've had their undivided attention on us, and we're going to give them our attention. That's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, so in this life and throughout beginningless lives and all the realms of samsara, when Venerable taught this last year, she said, whoa, if you study what samsara is, the different realms, and you see the vastness and how many of those realms we have, and that we have been in all of them and born in those as those beings, and we have gone there because we have caused others to create, the causes to be born in those realms as well, and rejoiced at their creation of destructive karma. So all of the rebirths in these different realms is due to us creating the causes for it, to cause others to create them, and to rejoice at that creation. So this is one of those, whoa, if you really understand the vast expanse of samsara and all the different realms that we have visited since beginningless time, this is sort of one of those stop buttons saying the vastness of this. So what we have done, what we have asked others to do that we don't want to do, and we rejoice. We have looked out for when we have encouraged your friends and relatives to lie, to create non-virtue. So I wanted to stop here and just put that out there. Since it says here, what we've caused others to create, before we get into the specifics here, what have we asked others to do in your life from the time you were a kid? What did you bribe, coerce, convince somebody to do for you that wasn't a very nice thing, in hopes that you would be able to get the result you wanted without having to take the hit? Can you remember anything, even when you were a little munchkin?
Very happy about this. I asked someone who was older than me to get my friends and I some alcohol when we were underage.
Oh yeah, how many underage alcohol requests? Okay, anything else? Nicole?
I can't think of or remember at this point any specifics, but I think of games of like truth or dare. We're trying to get people, on a dare to do something that they wouldn't normally do.
And watch them hopefully not hurt themselves. What else, folks, besides the alcohol? And probably cigarettes too. Venerable Nima? If there's any online too, Venerable Kunga, feel free to pop up.
I asked my brother to stand watch as a lookout while I damage somebody else's food.
Would you be more specific?
They were cooking, and they had something on the stove, and I asked them to just make sure to stand at the door and give me a signal when they were coming, while I put a ton of salt in their food that they were cooking. And then, of course, they came, and my brother just sort of froze there, and I was caught red-handed.
Isn't it great when karma ripens like immediately? There was a little bit of spite in there, a little bit of revenge. Huh? No.
This is not so much asking someone to do something, but just teaching someone to do something. That was a bad thing. I was taught to fish when I was a kid, and I've taught a lot of little kids to fish. I taught my nieces to fish. And also, I witnessed a lot of adults drinking when I was a kid, and as an adult, I drank a lot. And sometimes around kids that saw that, and probably as adults. Some of them did become drinkers as adults.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one, teaching how to kill. Well, I had one. This was in the past 20, when I lived in Seattle. There was a rat in my house. And it was before I met the Dharma. And now this is the lover of wildlife, right? Well, it was crawling around. It was one of those roof rats. They're big things, big long tails. And it was starting to eat up in the attic. I had the neighbor come over, set a trap, kill it, and take it away without me ever having to see it. I was totally, washed of any type of responsibility. I can't tell you how. And I just remembered this as I was doing this review. So this is something that, anyway, but I had asked him to do it, and because his worldview was, sure, I've got him at my house too, so it was not a problem for him, but I asked him to do it, and I rejoiced when he took it away without me seeing it. So, and then Venerable, she says, we ask other people to do non-virtue, but do we ask them to do virtuous ones where we get the merit on asking them to do something virtuous? Have we, so she says, this is a little bit harder to do. for some reason, asking people to do things that are virtuous. Can you think of something that you ever intentionally asked someone to do that was virtuous and rejoiced at it?
Fairly recent, I really encouraged my brother to help out our aunt who broke her hip. And I thought that his offers would just come naturally, and I heard they weren't. And so in a phone conversation, I just said, it would be so great if you could help out our aunt right now. She really needs the help. And he did go, and he felt good about it. But it needed some nudging.
Yeah. Yep. People are not used to being asked to do that. Yeah. Okay. So those are some of the things that we've done in our life to get what we want without having to, quote, supposedly create the karma, which we do. So in this text, it then goes to, these are some of the things that we have created, caused others to create and rejoice at the creation of: misusing offerings to holy objects, misusing offerings to the Sangha, stealing the possessions of the Sangha of the 10 directions. And once again, this is repeated 4 or 5 times in these 2 sections. I have caused others to create these destructive actions and rejoiced at their creation. Okay, so for the first, and I'll go through, there's mostly the holy objects, so we're talking about the 3 jewels. Okay, so this is where we start getting a little bit specific, is that the 3 jewels are considered to be a very, very powerful object of karma, mostly because they're the substantial cause for awakening and the greatest of benefit for all sentient beings. So she kind of describes this more in a... She just says, when someone makes an offering of value to the Buddha, and we have this happen here at the Abbey, people have their dear ones who die and they pass on heirlooms onto, members of the community, and they're offered to the Buddha. So we receive the heirlooms, and then the family will really want to either, make merit by offering it to the Buddha or for themselves. And so we can misuse the offerings by either, Venerable says, we actually steal them. This sometimes happens in Asia because the Buddhas get offered a lot of beautiful jewelry, and that supposedly can happen. They might steal it, or the community decides to safekeep the necklace. So we have them on the Buddhas right now. Some of our Buddhas have beautiful little pearl necklaces and stuff like this. But to remember that these heirlooms, objects of value, and this also includes the flowers, the food, the incense, the water, when we give them to the Buddha, they are not ours. And these valuable pieces, if we do get these valuable heirlooms and things like that, and we don't feel good about keeping them out in public, we can put them for safekeeping or ask the donor if we can perhaps sell them and use them to buy robes for the Buddha or to design and build a new altar. But there's this need for clarity that the things that belong to the Buddha are for the Buddha. We don't buy equipment, we don't buy computers with the money from whatever precious valuables we might sell that were offered to him. We buy him new robes, buy new statues in accord with another Buddha statue. So she doesn't get into unpacking this a lot, but to say that this is a very heavy karma to take things that belong to the 3 jewels and use them for our own personal use them to make money, use them for things of the world rather than for the 3 jewels. I had, and I could see my mind with this in the very, very beginning when I met the Dharma. When I was new, I was going to the Dharma Center that Venerable had started in Seattle. And I didn't have a lot of money in the beginning, but what I saw was that at the center, we always made offerings to the Buddha. And even though you're not here at the Abbey, if you're out there in the world and you belong to a Dharma center and things like that, there's offerings always made to the Buddha. So I thought this was a great idea. So I would go shopping and I'd get regular groceries, and then sometimes I would buy these treats. Like at the co-op in Seattle, they had like the best vegan brownies that I'd ever tasted. And they had wonderful chips, homemade bread. They were so good. So it's wonderful to, my mind was happy to buy these, but I didn't realize that I was really making an offering to myself, because I would put them on the altar the next day. I'd go to work, I'd come home, and I'd make dinner, and it just so happened that it was time to take down the altar that happened to have a vegan brownie on it. It was time for dessert. I did this for the first year of Dharma practice before I realized I never asked the Buddha for permission. So in some way, the Buddha was holding on to my offering until I asked him to give it to me so I could enjoy it. So as we have these beautiful sog offerings and we do these beautiful food offerings, and at the end of the night, before we take the water bowls down and the food offering, we're just custodians. We have to really ask the Buddha, dear Buddha, it's time to put the offerings away. May I remove the food? May I remove the flowers? May I remove the water? It's so helpful to keep the mind of knowing that these belong to the three jewels. Then offerings to the Sangha, to the Dharma. This is stealing any Dharma books from monasteries or Dharma centers. A lot of Dharma centers have Dharma books, and they may make them available to the folks who come to those Dharma centers. And same thing here at the library, that being really good. We don't steal. We don't take books, even though they're beautiful books and they're going to help us learn the Dharma. Stealing them is a serious, serious misdeed. Offerings to the Sangha, easier to do. This is about taking from the Sangha of the 10 directions. And this is to clarify, when we say Sangha, we're talking about the Sangha of the 10 directions, the monastic communities, not the, quote, Sangha of Dharma centers, the lay practitioners who practice as a group. That's a term. Sangha is used in a different, more Western way. This is more the Sangha, the monastic communities. So here at the Abbey, we've got, and Venerable just basically goes over, we have a lot of guidelines, when we put the food out for everyone, we can help ourselves to the food. It's all offered to the Sangha. We offer to the guests that are here. But in the kitchen, unless you have special permission to take the food, you can't go into the walk-in, you can't go into the fridge, you can't go into the pantry. We've got a whole team of people who sort of keep an eye that you can ask if you have needs. We have our personal retreats that we do, sometimes take food for our personal retreats. We can do that by asking permission. So she really comes back around. This is the guidelines that we've tried to hold here with the communities, that the food in that kitchen is really there for the Sangha of the 10 directions, that we have to really ask before we take it out. If we're cooking, if the guests are cooking, you're more than welcome to use the food. I mean, this is an agreement that we make. But to be very, very careful to not start slipping around and starting taking cheese out of the fridge at night, or going into the pantry and getting things that you've not asked for or that you've taken without permission. So once again, Song of the 10 Directions doesn't belong to just us. We have certain foods that are common use, the milk, the soy milk, the bread, the honey. Not a problem. Also, too, is that we have a lot of medical supplies here at the Abbey. We've got people have been very generous with toiletries, medical supplies. If some of our guests are sick or ill or injured, we certainly, Venerable Jigme's got a wonderful way she keeps track of that, and so we have medical supplies. We're more than willing to share these things. So the Sangha does have things that were offered that we do share with each other and to the laity. And I have caused others to create these destructive actions and rejoice at their creation. So once again, the Buddha is reminding us that if we have other people steal from the three jewels, we also create the karma of stealing from the three jewels, because even though we're not the person directly doing the stealing, the motivation is there, the completion of the action, the afflicted state of mind. We've got certainly some greed going on, some anger, some jealousy, something's going on to talk somebody into doing that. I've created the 5 heinous actions, caused others to create them, and rejoiced at their creation. So the 5 heinous actions, if they're done, committed, that is at the end of this life without a pause or any other rebirth. You go to a really a hell rebirth. These are very serious, heavy karmas. Now, there is some discussion about these 5, and I'll just share what I found out. They don't talk a lot about, in detail about them, but there is drawing blood from a Buddha with ill intent. Okay, so that's very important, that the motivation is ill intent. Creating a schism in the Sangha community, killing an arhat, killing one's father or mother. So in the Everlasting Rain of Nectar by Geshe Jampa Gyatso, who's a wonderful Tibetan teacher who had taught in Italy for years, he said that there's a debate about some of these actions, mostly between the folks who practice the fundamental vehicle and those that practice the Mahayana vehicle in the Buddhist tradition. So one, and he didn't say which one thought what, but it was that the conversation is, some say that you can only draw blood from the form of Shakyamuni Buddha, which is impossible for us to do. He's manifesting in myriad of limitless forms, but he's not in the form of Shakyamuni Buddha. The other view is that you can commit the heinous crime of drawing a Buddha from any Buddha. And of course, we don't know who they are, so that totally, if you're going to be wise and not draw the blood from a Buddha, some of the Mahayana, it might be the Mahayana tradition that says any Buddha that you draw blood with ill intent, that is a heinous crime. So Geshe Jampayasa says, regardless, none of us have committed this action, so it's best to be kind and not draw blood from anybody with ill intent. Accidentally we can harm, hurt somebody or draw blood. Killing an arhat doesn't say much about that. That is considered to be a serious, heavy karmic ripening there. When it comes to the schism in the Sangha, Geshe Jampayasa says that this refers directly to Devadatta, the cousin of the Buddha, who caused all sorts of consternation. He had a revenge, a spiteful relationship with the Buddha. He caused a schism, took a lot of the Sangha away, and that was the original schism. And Geshe-la states that we can still cause a schism in the Sangha that will have, as a ripening result, great negativity, but it will not be this heinous crime with immediate rebirth in the hell realms. So again, it would be a heavy karma, but it's not the heinous crime. So once again, schism in the Sangha, which is just, you just don't practice together, you don't do the rituals together, a lot of disharmony. And then the last, the other two is about killing your parents, killing your mom, killing your dad. I think the most recent one that came up in my mind is the young man who did all the killing at Sandy Hook, who killed those 20 children and those 6 teachers. What was always never quite put out into the front there is that before he went to the school, he killed his mother. I mean, and there's another one back in the 80s, the Menendez brothers killed both their parents. I think they wanted the wealth or something. It was a sensational thing on the newspapers for months. These 2 brothers, Jose and Carl Menendez, killed their parents. And the reason why that's such a heavy karma, because our parents are powerful objects of karma because they give us our life. They give us this human life. And we are, forever indebted to them because as a result of that, we have the possibility to meet the Dharma and to practice. Then the 5 parallel heinous actions, somewhat similar: killing a bodhisattva, killing an Arya who has realized emptiness directly, stealing provisions of the Sangha, similar to the ones we just read, destroying a monastery or a stupa, and one that says committing incest with your mother who is an Arhat. There's not much, on all the commentaries that I've heard, they don't really talk much about these, but they sound quite serious because these are beings and places that are there to benefit sentient beings, and by taking their lives, we are interrupting the possibility of them benefiting sentient beings. Okay, so the 4th is, I've committed the 10 non-virtues, involved others in them, and rejoiced in their involvement. Here we, once again, seeing that those parts matter, and Venerable Seppel went over these, and this is probably where we do most of our destructive action. These 10 non-virtues is where the purification really needs to be addressed. Now, Venerable does say that on the flip side, it's a wonderful activity to encourage others to rejoice in others' virtue, to celebrate goodness, and that this is a wonderful antidote to jealousy. That horrible state of mind, well worth stopping as soon as it arises. So once again, to be able to encourage virtue in the minds of others, to celebrate goodness. And that he does say that it takes some work encouraging people to do virtuous actions. It's harder than it sounds. Virtue can be a hard sell, to be kind, gentle, understanding, tolerant. Some people it's easy to encourage, other people not so easy. So she just says, once again, it's familiarity. The more that we're familiar with encouraging virtue in others, the more easier it will come for us to ask and to encourage, and perhaps easier it will become for others to become familiar with it as well. All right, being obscured by all this karma, I've created the cause for myself and other sentient beings to be reborn. And this is where, in the precious human life, we have the 8 freedoms and 10 fortunes. These are called the 8 leisureless or freedomless states. So these are the opposite of the 8 freedoms. So you're reborn in one of the 3 unfortunate realms. You're born as a long-lived God who, I think this, I didn't say, I don't know whether this is a God in the formless realm. 4th level of the form realm, where you have no body. You're in some state. Form realm? It's discriminationless, so there's no wherewithal to practice the Dharma. I think these are places that the Dharma is bereft, or you're born with physical disabilities or cognitive disabilities, although we can do a lot of practicing despite that, to have our faculties so impaired that we'd have no understanding of the Dharma. In a place where there is no Dharma, there are many places in the world that still don't have any Dharma, where the Buddha has not appeared. Venerable says we do live in a barbaric land. The U.S. can be considered right now, it's kind of on the edges of being a barbaric land, where the Dharma we're trying to bring it into its flourishing state in the United States. Holding wrong views, either being a nihilist, a hedonist, there's no ethical component to any of our actions. So once again, these are some of the ripening results from doing some of these actions, or causing others to do them, or rejoicing in others doing. So these paragraphs really drive home the fact that we deeply influence each other, and that when we get together, we create the karma together, and that we don't get away with anything in the end. So to really understand that karma functions. I'm gonna skip some. Okay, so being obscured. Okay, now before these Buddhas, transcendent destroyers who have become transcendental wisdom, who have become the compassionate eye, who have become witnesses, who have become valid and see with their omniscient minds, I am confessing and accepting all these actions as destructive. I will not conceal or hide them, and from now on I will refrain from committing these destructive actions. So we turn to the Buddhas who have transcended all sorrow, all afflictions, the self-grasping ignorance, all the defilements of existence, gross and subtle, have been eliminated. They've traveled the path before me, have attained all the realizations of the path, and now see this relationship with sentient beings, and because I've called them, it is my relationship with them, and they see everything with their omniscient minds. That includes our minds, because our minds are considered to be objects of knowledge, which the Buddha does perceive directly. They see that what we're up against, they have limitless compassion for us, there's no judgment, and that we lay bare our destructive actions and make a firm determination to refrain from them in the future. So this paragraph, bringing the Buddhas in as witnesses, it really says that we're starting to take responsibility for our own karma, our own destructive habits of speech and mind we're committing. We're making a determination to mitigate and slowly eliminate them for good, and to say that I will refrain from committing these destructive actions from now on. We're making just the picture of having the Buddhas in the space in front of you and making this resolve, making this determination, and then out of an incredible love and respect for ourselves, making that commitment to ourselves. This is one of the most powerful and most difficult, I find personally, is to remember the resolve once it is made. If I can remember it for even a day, I generally have difficulty with this, but to know that the Buddhas have witnessed it, and that I'm making this out of great compassion for myself, and with them there, it helps to bring this resolve into our hearts. And then the general confession goes into somewhat of the similar destructive actions of body, speech, and mind, also presenting because they are a heavy karma, we do create them in relationship to certain beings. So this one does go through, and Venerable says, I who am named, and she says it's very important to say your name out loud, circling in cyclic existence since beginningless time until the present. We are admitting that afflictions have run our lives. And in that state of mind, I have created. And then once again, we go through. If we had not caught it on the first round, we now have the general confession to remember I've created them in regards to the 10 non-virtues, the 5 heinous actions, the 5 parallel heinous actions. Okay, so this is, the Buddha knows our minds. I have a short attention span, so he's going to repeat it once again, just in case it fell through the cracks. And then in the middle of this paragraph, it says, I have transgressed the precepts of individual liberation, contradicted the trainings of a bodhisattva, broken the tantra commitments. So here we get into a different kind of purification, which is all around the ethical restraints or the precepts that we keep at whatever level. The pratimoksha ones, or the ethical restraints, are the ones that we take for there's 8 types of them, everything from one-day precepts through the monastic precepts, the lay precepts that laity take. These are all really about protecting our minds. They're not I shoulds, I have to, I'm supposed to. The sense of obligation needs to really be released. And purification helps a lot with this. It really starts to see that the precepts, the ethical restraints are very profound protection, so that we have a lot less confusion. So we come up with these situations where we have to make an ethical choice, either in a relationship or a situation arises that we've got to make a decision. When we have got our precepts somewhat known in our minds, there's no confusion, there's no ambivalence, there's no doubt, what should I do, what should I do? I know what I've committed to, I know what I'm going to keep, I know what I'm going to do. So the precepts become they help us from, vacillating. If we call them up, we also have to commit to knowing them at some level. They help us to hold our integrity and our consideration for others as well. And with this level of precepts, in the Abbey here, we have twice a month. We do on new and full moon. We will confess any of the monastic precepts that we have transgressed. The laity who do come here, when they're here, they will do the lay precepts. They'll confess and also renew them. And so we have this as a set ritual every month. And there's a freshness, there's a gladdening, I'm going to start over and start anew when we finish our ceremonies around our monastic precepts. It's a really powerful, palpable feeling when we are transparent, we open up to the community, and that we enter the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and say, I've done this, I will do my best to refrain, I admit my mistakes, and it really just, really clears the slate that we can start and renew, afresh. As far as the Bodhisattva ethical restraints, Venerable Sangye Kadro has been reviewing them on Thursday mornings. They're just so beautiful to hear them again. And we want to keep them with a very strong bodhicitta motivation, like their Bodhisattva training, guidelines. And they are listed in relationship to actions that we do that are counter to the 6 perfections. So there's a list of harmful actions we do, a lot of motivation on why we do things that are counter to generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, joyous effort, concentration, wisdom, to really see the mind that propels the action. And that the Bodhisattva ethical restraints are ones that we carry through lifetimes. We keep them. Or they're in our minds, life after life. And it's always good to remember, and this is something that helps me immensely, is that when we go through the precepts, we go through the pratimoksha, we go through the bodhisattva, we go through the tantric precepts, we have to remember that these are what the bodhisattvas practiced as they progressed along the path. It's always good to remember that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are born from the wish to help others, and they accomplish this by doing exactly what we're doing. We have to get this across, that Buddhas don't come from some other place. They don't have another curriculum. They don't have another path, and they just show up when they're awakened. We are tracking exactly in their footsteps. The precepts, the 10 virtues, the thought trainings, everything that the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas have done we are doing. They purified. When they broke them, they recommitted themselves for keeping them for eons. This is to encourage us. We're tracking right in line with their path. Nothing else but what we're doing now is what they've done. And this can really prevent discouragement. Like we're losing connection with them. They're ahead of us. They're at the end of the path. And we are right. I sometimes say, I'm right behind you. Might be countless great eons, but I am on the same path. Okay, then we get down to, I've been disrespectful to my kind parents, spiritual mentors, spiritual friends, and those following the pure paths. Okay, so here once again, these are people in our life that support us, who've given us life, who benefit sentient beings, who benefit us, who are our companions on the path, and being disrespectful to them. How does that happen? Let's do a real. How do we disrespect our parents? Lie to them. Disobey them. Talk back. Criticize them to their faces. Anybody ever steal from their parents? Extra change, cigarettes? Took a quarter? Yeah. Makeup, mascara. Use your dad's razor blade on your legs. They found out about that. Okay. That was dangerous. And how about, and so what Venerable says is, so all these kinds of things, usually with, people that we love, our parents, our family members, to own it and to see how much energy it takes to not want to admit them. I mean, this stuff carries over for decades. And it comes up in the middle of purification practice, how we have been disrespectful to them. And it's important to make peace with them because it really does color our world. It does color our life. If we cannot work through letting go and healing our relationship to our parents, I'll tell you, it plays itself out. I didn't work this out until I was in my early 50s. And I'll tell you, it just colored my world, colored my relationships, just really held back my growth as a kind human being. And when I was able to really let it go, it just opened my heart for them in ways that I could have never imagined. And they are extremely powerful objects, so it's very important that we purify whatever harmful actions of body, speech, and mind we have had toward our parents. And they don't have to be alive for us to do this. Venerable really talked about that this morning. This is for us, the purification for this disrespect to our parents. How about our spiritual mentors? How do we disrespect them? We ask for it, we request it, and we don't follow their instructions. Yes, but taking them for granted. Lying to them. Omitting the details of something that we've done. How about spiritual friends? So these are the folks, that's us. People who are following, along our spiritual companions. How do we disrespect each other? Compete. Who knows more? Who practices better? Who sits longer? Who what? Yeah, yelling at them, raising our voice. Negative criticism in front of their face or behind their backs. Jealous of their Dharma practice, their ability to study, learn, remember, recall things. Bullying them. Forcing them, coercing them to do things that we want them to do. Harsh speech. Using your position in the community to coerce them into doing things that they don't feel comfortable doing. She also says in here, disrespecting those following the pure paths, and Venerable describes them as people, they don't have to actually be Buddhists. She says these are the people who are doing good in the world. If there's any jealousy, arrogance, harsh speech, people who are doing virtuous paths. So we have people in the world that we may not agree on how they're getting things done, how they're benefiting people. committed actions harmful to the three jewels. How have we avoided the holy Dharma? I've looked for some commentary on this and I didn't see too much. How might you think? How would we avoiding the holy Dharma? We're going to teachings when they're offered. Okay, to disregard its wisdom, to disregard the wisdom of the Dharma, and to continue to live a worldly life because it's easier than looking at what the Dharma is asking you to look at. I put finding fault with it. I know that I struggled a lot when Venerable started teaching on the self-centered thought. There was like some serious pushback. I didn't really want to hear it. Then criticizing the Arya Sangha, harming living beings. We don't know who the Arya Sangha are in our world. I'm sure that they are, if they're Bodhisattvas, they're with us. These and many other destructive actions I have done harm living beings. How do we treat them, especially when we don't like them or we think they're insignificant or a pest or just food? Now, one of the things that Venerable, I think she taught this in Singapore when she was teaching, I think, Shantideva's chapter on fortitude, that she said that we have to understand that sentient beings are loved limitlessly by the Buddha without end. And that if the Buddha treasures living beings more than himself, then what does our relationship need to be to them? If the Buddha loves everyone and cares for them like his only child, how does that reflect on how we treat them if they are what he loves more than anything? And that this limitless love. And that they are our substantial causes for our awakening. Without them, we will not create the causes to progress along the path. They are the teachers to us in some form or another, at some time or another. So when you really look at this, and when I did this in my retreat, and I came to this piece here about harming living beings, there was a level of, it was really kind of a moving moment for me in that purification practice, because I felt that there was a indebtedness that we are indebted to them forever. You know, for all that they give us, the kindness that they show, the buttons they push, the opportunities they give us, that there is this kind of repayment of kindness that we really are indebted to them forever. And then ask, then how do we treat them despite that knowing, despite that understanding? And then once again, in the last paragraph, then it says, these and many other destructive actions I have done, caused others to do and rejoiced in others doing. In short, I have created many obstacles to my own higher rebirth and liberation, have planted countless seeds for further wanderings in cyclic existence in the miserable states of being. This is like totally getting karma. You know, I have created the obstacles to my own higher rebirth and liberation. I have planted the countless seeds for further wanderings in cyclic existence and miserable states of being. That is a conclusion. And then the last verse is, because I understand that at some level, now in the presence of these spiritual mentors, these great Vajra holders, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who abide in the 10 directions and the Venerable Sangha, we have a limitless sky filled with all these holy beings who are witnessing this statement with love, with limitless compassion. They are just totally we have their undivided attention. We have their undivided attention, and we are saying, I confess all these destructive actions. I will not conceal them, and I accept them as destructive. I promise to refrain from doing these actions again in the future. By confessing and acknowledging them, I will attain and abide in happiness, while by not confessing and acknowledging them, true happiness will not come. That we really understand karma in the fact that virtuous actions like purification will bring happiness. It will bring us a peace of mind as we put these harmful actions down, reform our relationships with all different beings, to make peace now in this life. That's what purification does now in the moment. We are creating the causes and conditions to have ultimate peace. Where in the future, I mean, this is all part of not just making life doable now, but purification really does open up our understanding of what ultimate true happiness really is. The freedom from all these defilements, the freedom of the polluted karma that propels us life after life. So here, the natural purity of our minds will emerge, and the mind will manifest in the form of Vajrasattva, green Tara, Chenrezi, or some different Buddha. All of this purification is one of the substantial causes to have the body and the mind of Vajrasattva, or any Buddha, for the sole purpose of benefiting all those beings who once upon a time we had harmed, but in turn are some of the most substantial causes for our awakening. And because of their kindness and their care, pointing out our faults, triggering us, pushing our buttons, they have helped us to achieve that great aim. The whole purification, the whole bodhicitta on how we are interrelated and how sentient beings help propel us to awakening becomes more and more apparent the more you do this practice. And that by seeing that, we are going to be able to return this great kindness by helping them purify, free themselves. And then we call to mind all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, spiritual teachers, the source of our courage, the source of our faith, the source of our inspiration. And then we put that all into the Vajrasattva practice. Any part of this confession, you can take a piece of that and put it into one of those, purifications of body, speech, or mind. And so this is filled with difficult but very profound understandings that we can really take to heart and add to our purification practice with Vajrasattva, the 35 Buddhas, any of the practices that we have.
The first is, I chose to remove the ventilator from the grandfather who raised me. He was like a father. Was this a heinous action?
Did he have, Venerable Tarpas asked if they had an advance directive, if there was honoring a directive that he had, that he did not want to be sustained by any artificial means. That's, these are, they're very profoundly deep and complex questions, Ventilators are the motivation. If she did this or he did this with incredible love and care, this is an artificial means to keep him alive, that if the ventilator weren't there, he would pass. This is...
He had no instruction.
If they remove the ventilator, you're not killing the person. They're going to just die naturally. They're being artificially kept alive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just as you said, yeah. If somebody is viable and they're able to recover from whatever the malady is, then they wouldn't approach the family to even ask that question. So it's when they have determined that it's not feasible that the person is going to recover, they're probably brain dead, and the machine is just keeping them alive. So it's really not considered a death that you're killing someone. Yeah.
Second question.
Why at the Abbey do those of us who are not empowered stop our prostrations and read the general confession? If we are short on time, is it appropriate to just do the general confession?
It has nothing to do with some kind of empowerment. It's if you have that section memorized, then keep prostrating. It's such an important section. If you don't have it memorized, it would be really good to read it. That's the only reason that people stop prostrating during that section.
That's a venerable suggestion, okay. Yeah, very important. As we could see, that general confession is packed with very important practice, thought training, purification, and different objects that are very strong objects of karma. So it's really helpful if you don't have it memorized to read it until you do.
Is it appropriate to put jewelry on a statue of Shakyamuni Buddha or Jaisangkapa, although they are monastics? Or should the jewelry instead be put on statues of deities like Chenrezig or Tara?
Well, it's a nice problem to have. One of the things that is beautiful about the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is that those precious valuables and heirlooms, because we have statues that get filled, that we have, our Buddha statues are filled with many precious things, and part of that is people give us these things for the Buddha, and when the statue is filled, those beautiful precious objects go into the Buddha, and then they're, what's the word, not dedicated, consecrated. So the Buddha does have the necklace, but it's at the crown of his head or somewhere around the lotus or someplace like that. So I'm not sure there's a right or wrong answer to whether the Buddha should wear a necklace or not. I'm afraid right. The jewelry that we do have is on Kuan Yin. She's the one who wears the most jewelry at the Abbey, as far as I know. And it's some beautiful pearls.